These days that everyone is talking about election of the USA, we wanna tell you 10 interesting points from the US presidential election laws. Atheistic candidacy is prohibited. The United States recognizes the separation of religion and state, but some states circumvent the law, saying that anyone who wants to run for office must at least believe in God. In Texas, for example, a person who wants to run for office is not allowed to take a religious exam, as stated in Article 1 of his or her Constitution, but that person must accept the existence of a superior being. Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi, Maryland, and Arkansas have similar laws. Subscribe our YouTube channel to watch the rest of this video and more. Many US states design state-specific labels and gives them to the person who casts their ballot. No one really knows when the I voted label came into vogue in the United States, but many polling people these days wear one of these labels on their chests. However, the Florida-based company claims to have been the first designer of these labels and has been producing the I voted label since 1986. Some US states produce state-specific labels. In the state of Georgia, for example, the label given the voters is in the form of a peach, which is the official fruit of the state. Of course, there are cities like Chicago that have collected the label for economic reasons. Some researchers say the label tradition can have a psychological effect and increase participation. The results of a new study show that many voters vote to be able to tell others they have voted. Voters in Indiana can stay in the ballot box for a maximum of 2 or 3 minutes. 3 minutes for a primary, 2 minutes for a presidential election. However, this law does not apply in practice. That is, if someone stays longer, the district officials will not forcibly evict him. In Alabama, the maximum voting time is 4 minutes. An official then asks the voter if he or she wants help. If he or she wants help, he can stay in the polling station for a maximum of 5 more minutes. Otherwise, they give him up to 1 minute extra time. Of course, all this is if there is a queue. If someone is not behind the person who is voting, the voter will not have a time limit. In Indiana and Alabama, voters cannot stay in the ballot box for more than a few minutes. In the Kentucky Constitution, stupid and insane people do not have the right to vote, but this can only be determined by a judge. More interestingly, the words stupid and crazy people seem to have been commonplace at one time, as they are also mentioned in the constitutions of Ohio, New Mexico, and Mississippi. For example, Article 5 of the Ohio Constitution states, "No idiot or insane people shall have the right to vote." In this state, too, this right can only be taken away from someone by a court order. But under USA federal law, individuals can only be barred from voting because of their mental state. The National Coalition for Mental Illness says under the law, people with mental disabilities can vote if someone is with them and helps them. In at least 7 US states, voters who cast their ballot before election day can change their ballot. About 40% of eligible voters are said to have cast their ballot before November 8. That's why Donald Trump told people in his Wisconsin campaign that if they voted for Hillary Clinton and regretted it, they should change their mind. Under the Wisconsin Electoral Code, each voter can change his or her ballot 3 times before election day. The states of Minnesota, New York, and Mississippi have similar laws. For years, the sale of alcohol on election day has not been banned nationwide or by a state, but there are small and large cities that still adhere to this rule. For example, in 18 cities and 7 districts of Indiana on November 8, the sale of alcohol is prohibited. If George Washington were alive, he probably would have considered the ban to be contrary to the American spirit. In 1758, when he ran for the US legislature, he bought all of his campaign budget, £50, for the people who would vote for him and possibly vote for him. In 1797, George Washington started a large whiskey factory on his property in Mount Vernon, Virginia. 2 years after his death, his production was one of the largest in America. George Washington Confectionery was rebuilt in 2007 in Mount Vernon, Virginia. In last election in USA, a group of political activists wanted to bring puppies to polling stations in Iowa, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and New Hampshire on election day to encourage young people to vote. According to Business Insider, the idea came after members of the group realized that participation rates were higher where polling station officials or volunteers working in the polling station brought their dogs. And the group has also used technology to attract young people. This is the first time that people born since 2000 have been able to vote. So political activities have used games like Pokemon Go and apps like Thunder to gain access to these polls. These days, it's no longer customary to invite someone else to a duel to resolve a dispute. But if anyone is found and resorted to this old-fashioned way, they should call the official in Tennessee. According to an old law, an official who fights or duels is dismissed. It was in 1997 that George W. Bush, then governor of Texas, signed into law the state legislature paving the way for astronauts to vote from space. As explained by NASA, the astronaut receives a special email and returns the voting response to the same email to election officials. Kate Robbins, the American astronaut who returned to Earth on October 30, had voted on the International Space Station before returning. Shane Kimbrough also voted from the same station on election day. Under the U.S. Constitution, the president does not have to lay down his gospel to take the oath of office, but George Washington established the tradition at his inauguration. In 1825, John Quincy Adams was sworn in a book of American law, and Theodore Roosevelt did not touch any books in his first inauguration in 1902. But most American presidents have abandoned what they consider to be symbolic gospels. Barack Obama, for example, relied on the Bible used by Abraham Lincoln for his second presidential inauguration, marking the 150th anniversary of the American Declaration of the Slave. Also on the Gospel of Martin Luther King Jr. on the 50th anniversary of the Anti-Racist March in Washington.